Siege tanks can no longer be picked up by medevacs though. So it's as simple as that. When they're in siege mode, they can no longer be picked up by medevacs, and they also annihilate anything on the ground, basically. They're Brood War siege tanks now. 70 damage. Let's just talk about the Liberator first. Liberator removes the plus damage against light, which I think is good because they were just, as you can see here, like, it can be pretty ridiculous how if light units clump, you'll watch this. Yeah, they just all die. So they were pretty darn good. And they're already good against ground as it is. Like, they had this really strong function. So I like how the air attack is more of a filler, I guess, and not, say, another strong attribute to the Liberator. It's just more like a mild, like, yes, it can attack air as well. And it does okay. It does some splash. So it even there, it has like a pretty decent attribute to it, the splash damage. Still. So I do think that's a good change. The Thor change, as far as I understand, the Javelin missile launcher's radius is increased by 0.1. I guess that's a big difference. And the high impact payload anti-air weapon now prioritizes before the anti-ground weapon. Yeah, so it prioritizes air attacks before ground if you switch it to the high impact. So in other words, something like Broodlords, the Thor will not target the Broodlings. It'll target the Broodlords over the Broodlings if the high impact payload mode is on. Every time. As long as the Broodlord is within range, it'll always prioritize the Broodlord over the Broodlings. I think that's sounds like a pretty good change. The Thor, again, trying to find its spot in the StarCraft universe. I think maybe something else could be done here, but maybe that will, with all these other mech changes, that will make the Thor a little bit more viable and interesting. I wonder if there could be like a research maybe that the Thor would be repaired twice as fast by SCVs or something. That might be so that they could be like this stronghold defensive unit that could be repaired by SCVs twice as effectively. So those are the Thor changes. Banshee speed is more accessible. Removed the fusion core requirement, and so you can just basically upgrade it straight from the tech lab when it's attached to a starport. Viking, this bothers me. I like the idea of it, but I'll tell you why it bothers me. When you transform to ground mode Vikings, they land on the ground. Their attack is plus 8 damage to mechanical. I remember the Warhound had extra damage to mechanical, and that's always bugged me unless there's a specific reason for it. Like if it's like, they shoot like these, I don't know, these EMP rods or something that would screw up mechanical units or whatever. I'm looking at this from a lore perspective and like it makes sense perspective. But like Gatling guns doing extra damage mechanical doesn't really make much sense to me. I guess that's why it bugs me. I like the idea that the Viking does get a buff of some sort when it lands on the ground. I don't know. I guess it just that little aspect bothers me. I do think they could use some sort of buff though when they land on the ground. Again, I think overall as a gameplay mechanic, it's a fine change, but it's just another tag that you have to kind of remember or whatever. I don't know. I'd like to hear you guys' feedback on that. Battlecruiser. This is a big change. This is a big buff. I almost feel like it's an over buff, but it definitely will make the battlecruisers a lot better. So we'll see how it plays out, and if it's too much, maybe they'll maybe pull it back just a little smidget. But I really think the battlecruiser will be way more viable, especially against Protoss now. No longer has energy. Tactical jump and Yamato Cannon obviously don't cost energy. They have cooldowns, and it's a separate cooldown. Yamato Cannon, 71 seconds. Tactical Jump, 71-second cooldown. First of all, you can't feed back the battlecruisers anymore. See, this is why I think it might be too strong. You can Yamato Cannon the base, blow it up, the main base or whatever structure you need to, and then just Tactical Jump out of there before. And then you can continue to destroy the base until the army gets there, and then you're gone. Tactical Jump out. And then just over a minute later, you can do the same thing all over again. I think it might be too strong. I'm really excited to see it, though, and we'll see how it goes. But, yeah, very, very strong, and you'll see a lot more battlecruiser play, which is exciting, of course. The Raven, this is pretty crazy. Basically, it does double damage. No, not double. It goes from 16 to 24, so almost double damage. So that's basically the power of 6 Marines shooting. And, you can see the difference here. The bottom one is the obvious winner. It kills all the Zerglings, whereas this one did not. And he even had extra time to spare. But yeah, so it does a lot more damage. The duration is still pretty small, but yeah. All this you can read on the Battle.net website. I'll leave the link in the description below. But so yeah, that is all the Terran changes. So again, that's quite a bit. We're not even halfway done. Protoss changes. The Tempest. This is interesting. So it gets like a nerf and a buff at the same time. You give a little, you get a little. So supply increased from 4 to 6, and the ground attack hasn't been increased by 5. So that means you can kill Zerglings in one hit now, which is nice. But the anti-air attack is the same. No changes there. The ground attack has also reduced range from 15 to 6. So you can no longer siege structures anymore that are on the ground. So, which is basically every single structure. So they can no longer siege, really. But they can still, with this new ability. So the air attack stays the same. The ground attack has been nerfed quite a bit, and the supply has been increased. But here's where I think this is interesting, but also at the same time, I know is going to change. I know this will change. New ability, Disruption Sphere. First of all, I don't like the name because, one, it's called Disruption Sphere. And we already have a unit called the Disruptor, and it's a sphere. So I feel like the name should be changed. It's bothering me. Please change the name. Yes. Call it like Zippity Zappity. No, I don't know. But immediately, so what it does is it launches a ball of energy at the ground. So I think the range is the same as the air. So you can launch this from a siege distance. Against ground. So you still have that siege against ground, kind of. And the damage, it can damage units and buildings in that location, but not your own units. It does not do friendly fire. It does 450 damage over 32 seconds. So basically, it's like this, really long, drawn-out Psystorm that does less damage over time, less damage per second, but it does more damage over time. So it's 450 damage over 32 seconds and has a 43-second cooldown. And the radius is, I think, bigger than a Psystorm as well. And the cast range is 13. So you can siege with it. So here it is in action. We can't make this bigger, but we can zoom in. So here it is in action here. So you see this, that's what it looks like. So you see that big... And so basically it can push siege tanks out of the way. It can damage structures from afar. As you see, those turrets can now hit the Tempest when they regularly auto-attack the turrets because the range is reduced. But yeah, so it doesn't do too much damage, as you can see, like over time. It's like not doing too much per second. But the reason why this can be extremely deadly is, one, massing Tempest when you can just constantly just plop down layer upon layer, like continuously kind of push forwards, a slow push forward with these disruption spheres. So I think that is can be pretty good maybe in a lot of scenarios. Maybe not. I could be completely wrong. But the other thing that I know probably will be a problem is the mineral lines. You do that to a mineral line, you can't use the mineral line for like half a minute. So I think that is going to be a big problem and will probably be changed to some degree somehow. I don't know how, but I feel like it will. But yeah, so I think this is going to be altered. I don't think it'll stay. And if it does, I don't think it'll stay for very long. At least in my opinion. I can't see that being okay to mineral lines. Like there's literally no counterplay once it's launched. You can go and prevent it from happening by like protecting your airspace behind your mineral line, but once it happens, your mineral line is locked down for over 30 seconds basically. And if you send those workers in to mine, they will die. So that's what I see the problem there. The Zealot is getting a buff, thank goodness. It's not a very. It's more of a late game buff. I would like to see an early game buff to some degree, but so basically the Zealot, when you research charge, if you didn't know, your movement speed is increased naturally, like the regular movement speed of a Zealot. It goes to 3.85. Well, now it's increased even more to 4.13. So this is not the charge, the actual, like, when you actively charge against an enemy unit, but just the regular run speed. It has been increased once you do the research. Do your research. So, again, I think this is good because Zealots are a melee unit that, often have times actually attacking. They do pretty good damage, but they don't get to deal that damage very often unless you corner the enemy, or if they're not a very, if they're, like, I guess, mech and they can't really kite or whatever. But they get kited quite a bit. So I do like that, which is nice. I kind of wish to see, because Zealots, I feel like Adepts have completely, like, you never get a Zealot early game. I shouldn't say never. You rarely get a Zealot early game. They're almost useless. They're good at blocking chokes. They're just not as good. Like, if they don't have that charge research, they're good at taking hits, but so are Adepts. And Adepts are they have way more utility, and I would say they do more damage because they get to attack more. Not because they do more damage overall, like their actual attack, but they just get to attack. They have more attack opportunities because they have range. Whereas Zealots, they get kited like crazy, so they don't get to deal the damage that they should be able to deal. So I would suggest perhaps Zealots only cost 75 minerals. They might be more viable early game and more viable late game as well. They won't be so taxing on your resources. So that doesn't change any of the actual stats, the combat stats of the Zealot, but it does make them a little bit easier to use and less taxing on your economy. So that's what I would suggest. I do like the speed upgrade. I really like that a lot. So carrier, we have some interesting changes here, which I think are pretty good actually. So they removed the release interceptor ability. I actually really enjoyed it, but I understand why. It kind of made the carrier like a swarm host, kind of, that costed minerals, a flying swarm host, which they didn't want the carrier to be. They wanted them to be like a part of the interceptors, like they had to be near the interceptors, and you could just launch the interceptors. If you don't know in Legacy of the Void, you can launch the interceptors in a specific location and then just leave. And the interceptors would stay there for about a minute and then self-destruct if they weren't killed off. So there's really not much counterplay to it. Like, once the interceptor's there, you're forced to just fight them, and the carrier can just leave. Even if you kill the carrier, the interceptors still hang around. What I like to do was, when my carrier was about to die, I would launch the interceptors. So when it died, the interceptors would stay. So it was actually pretty powerful. So what they're removing that, and instead making the interceptors cost 5 minerals instead of 25, which freaking I like, because, oh my gosh, they costed way too much minerals sometimes. I think that was one of the worst things about them, that would not make them viable in so many scenarios, because the interceptors would just die way too easily, especially against like things like Hydralisks or Mass Marines or whatever. The interceptors would just fly in there and literally die before they got to attack sometimes. And then they would fly in such a big circle that all these units would be attacking them. And yeah, it just, yeah. So I like that it costs less minerals. I like to see how that goes. And auto build is enabled from the start, which is always nice. Is the carrier going to get more hit points? Because they did nerf the hit points because of this. I think because of this, it made it so powerful. The release interceptor ability. So maybe if it's still not good enough, which I think this would significantly improve its potency, but if it's still not good enough, give the like the 50 or 100 hit points back, whatever it was. I can't remember now. Dark Templar. This I can see a lot of people complaining about and rage quitting over. However, I think look at it from fresh eyes, maybe. But basically, DTs get blink. They can blink. I'll show the example. Down here, blink. They're gone. Whereas up here, they can't escape and die. So the idea behind this is that so you have to research it from the Dark Shrine. So it's not something you can just have once you have Dark Templar. It'll take another 2 minutes, 2 minutes and 1 second before you actually have the ability to blink your, it's called Shadow Stride, to blink your Dark Templar. Excuse me. And it does have a 21-second cooldown. And it does make a visible smoke effect when casted. So as you can see here, so you can see where they blink to. So it's not like, oh, where'd they go? But you know what direction they blink to. So there's that. So the idea is that Dark Templars could play a big role when they weren't expected. But as soon as Dark Templars were there, and the game didn't end, obviously, they were no longer, like, there was almost no point to them. They couldn't do much if there's a detection around. Like they aren't cost efficient at all. So this is the idea that they can still be viable late game after detection is around and stuff like that. They can do a bit more of a hit and run, as you see in the example here, and have a little bit more survivability without changing any of the actual stats. So I do kind of like the idea of the change. What I'm afraid of is for amateur players. I think pros, it won't, like, these things can blink into your base, but pros know how to handle this stuff, and people who are higher level know how to handle this stuff. But I think people who are mid to lower level, DTs can blink into your base. There's no longer a warp prism needed. I don't know. I guess you can argue that a warp prism is the same thing. I don't know. But if they blink into your base, though, then they're probably, if you can kill them, then they can't really escape. You know what I mean? They have a 21-second cooldown, so they can't really escape. So, but I can see this being all rage-inducing to lower-level players. So, but I don't know. We'll see how that plays out. Swarm hosts, reduce costs and increase swoop range. Swarm host needed some sort of buff, I guess, and so I guess we'll see how that goes. I don't have really any thoughts on that. Swoop range, I think I think that is good, because sometimes they would just die before they could get anywhere. So we'll see how that goes. I think that is going to make a pretty big difference, and then reduced costs will definitely make them more viable. You can get them without having too much of a resources put into them, which is always nice. Ravagers are getting a nerf. Their armor tag, they're going to be armored again, which means stalkers do more damage, or anything that deals extra damage to armored deals more damage to them, so they'll die a little quicker, as you can see in these examples here. The Hydralisk getting a big buff. Its attack range increased from 5 to 6. And instead of the research allowing them to just basically move the same speed off creep as they do on creep, it's now just a speed buff. They just increase speed, so now they move even faster off creep, or on creep. So they're going to be a little bit more agile, as you can see in this kiting scenario here against adepts, which is pretty amazing. That's 3 adepts versus 4 Hydralisks, and you can win with Hydralisks if you kite. I don't think they have the attack speed upgrade, but so yeah, so not the worst, still not the best decision against adepts, but shows that with a little micro you can actually win against some of these adepts if you have the space. And Banelings, this is nice, because I'm a Protoss player and I get frustrated when I get Marine Marauder counters, but they're still able to beat me because of, like, they can, like, split or micro or whatever, and I think that's good. Obviously, microing's good, but even, like, I can't really counter micro a lot of the times. Like, my micro doesn't help me against their micro when it comes to these kind of things. So I imagine Zergs can be frustrated with Banelings. You can attack with Banelings, split them or whatever, and if a Terran player is really, really good, the Banelings will really do, like, nothing. Right here is just an A-move scenario, and it shows how much these Banelings are supposed to be the bane to the Marines, and they still don't really do too much. But just a little bit of hit points buff, they'll do a lot more. So I think it will make it more challenging for Terran players to micro their Marines against it, but it's still doable. It's 10 extra hit points, 33% extra hit points increase, and but maybe it'll change up the composition just a bit. Marines aren't quite as strong as they used to be against Zerg. So, but yeah. So the Infestor. Infestor, pretty big change here. You can cast all the abilities while burrowed, which is pretty crazy. And then you can also deep tunnel. So that means for 50 energy cost, you can basically tunnel anywhere onto the map. It's like a teleport, basically. You can go anywhere on the map for 50 energy. Sounds really good, but remember, it's 50 energy or 50 mana. But it costs 50 energy. So, and infestors can't do anything if they don't have energy. So you got to manage that energy. Even if you're attacking and running and deep tunneling out of there, you got to make sure you got 50 energy left over, or else your infestors will die. And if you want to deep tunnel to defend somewhere or attack, whatever, or attack somewhere, you got to make sure you got, enough energy to do the other spells. After the 50 energy has been taken. So I think this is very strategic. I think it's very powerful as well, but there's also that cost that you got to be weary about, I guess. But yeah, all abilities to cast while burrowed. My personal thoughts are that fungal will be super powerful. So I feel like if it was just neural parasite, you could cast, and obviously infested Terran. But if you cast neural parasite while burrowed, I think that, to me, that's fine. There's a visual, like, oh, there's a tentacle coming out of the ground and taking control of my unit. You know exactly what's happening. Whereas with fungal growth, I feel like it could be much too deadly. It's not as, I guess there is a projectile now, so you can see the green ball coming at you and exploding and fungaling you. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like it might be a little bit too powerful here, but we'll see. But yeah, I would say if I were to make the change, I would say maybe fungal growth still has to be casted above ground, whereas the rest of it is fine. But we'll see how that goes. I do like how the Infestor is getting a buff, and really excited for some more Infestor play. Broodlord getting a nerf, range decrease from 11 to 10. So, and they say at the end, remember, this is early preview. Things may look considerably different once changes go live. So these all, might not be implemented. But this is a lot of changes, guys. I want to hear your thoughts on it. Make a discussion in the comments below. And I believe the Reddit post might be still up on Reddit, StarCraft Reddit. But so you can continue the conversation there. But there's a lot of changes. I like these. I love changes. I love it when there's changes happening because it's just, new strategies happen. And I get bored with the same old strategy. That's probably why I don't follow build orders. And again, I'm a diamond player. I've only experienced basically a third of the game. I am a Protoss player. So I am more racist towards Protoss or whatever you want to call it. But so I might have a biased opinion here with some of these things. But overall, I think these siege tanks I'm a little bit scared of, to be honest. 70 damage, I'm terrified of that. But then again, flying siege tanks were kind of scary too. So we'll see what happens. I'm excited to test these things out. I'm totally open-minded to all these things, and I want to try these changes out. None of them look particularly like, what, are you freaking kidding me, Blizzard? Other than maybe the Tempest ability to mineral lines. That thing I feel like is game-breaking potentially, but we'll see. We'll see how that goes for the Tempest here. So yeah, guys, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and see you later. See you later, man. See ya. We're hanging out Friday, right? Because we best friends. We're the best.